Good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to the Finance Committee of the Akron Public Schools. I am Barbara Sykes, the chair of the Finance Committee, and our co-chair is Member Harrison has joined us, as well as our president of the board and ex-officio member of the Finance Committee, President Autry. So we're going to start with our previous meeting summary, and I'm new to this, so what is the previous meeting summary? Dr. Thompson. Dr. Thompson is Dr. Stephen Thompson, who is the treasurer for the Akron Public Schools.
So, yeah, we have on our agenda the previous meeting to take a look at our previous meeting summary from August, which was our last meeting. So you can see here what was talked about. It was we talked about the approval of the previous Finance Committee meeting minutes, of course. We had a presentation from Dr. Chapman as it relates to the levy. We looked at in-depth the July 2024 financial report and our commercial paper summary. Commercial paper is our investments, which have been doing well and continue to do well, although we're beginning to see the market slightly taper off. And we had a presentation on our student wellness and success funds and what we do with those, and then, of course, updating on board member information. So that is the summary from our last meeting. And Dr. Chapman is not with us today, but we still want to just do a levy update. As most of you may or may not know, Mrs. Sykes serves as the treasurer on our levy committee. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Sykes.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Just a real quick update on the levy, the Community Levy Committee. We are up and running. We are very pleased with the way that the levy is going. We appreciate the support that we are receiving from the community. Early voting has started, and as President Autry and I just finished discussing, she was out at early voting today, as was I, and we were both very amazed by the number of early voters that we are seeing, and we would encourage the public to continue to come out and to vote. And I would say that one of the most positive comments that I'm receiving are from those graduates of North High School, and they cannot wait to see a new North High School. So that is a very positive part of being able to stand at the polls and to talk to the citizens. And so we have this weekend, there will be voting taking place at the Summit County Board of Elections on Saturday. And then next week, the hours will be extended. And so we would just encourage everyone to make sure that they come out and vote. We would ask that they consider looking at the facts and determining how they feel about the levy. But regardless, we want to make sure that everyone just vote, because voting is what we want people to do more than anything, because that's the most important thing that we can do for our city, for our county, for our country. So if there are any questions about our levy, please don't hesitate to go to our website, which is akronsschoollevy.com. And I don't know if President Autry want to add anything to her experience today.
Yeah, I would just echo what you said. It was refreshing just to see so many people civically engaged. I saw a lot of young people who were actually brought home from college on breaks to make sure that they got their votes in. So just encouraging folks who have those young people that are away to make sure that they take advantage and exercise that right to vote while they're away.
So before we go any further, let me just note that also joining us for the committee meeting is board member Dr. Molinar and our superintendent, Dr. Robertson. So, Dr. Thompson, so we're going to talk about the September monthly finances, right?
That's correct. So,
Okay.
first of all, welcome, Chairman Sykes, President Autry, Reverend Harrison, Dr. Robinson, and Dr. Molinar, and our media presence. So thank you for coming here, and thank you for telling the story, because it's very important to tell the story. And part of our story is where we stand financially, and that's a great segue from the levy to here. And again, we're starting to hear this being echoed out in the community a little bit. House Bill 920, I would be remiss not to mention, please do your due diligence and Google it. But in short, House Bill 920 freezes revenue forever, in perpetuity. And we've gone 12 years without a new levy. So probably went almost too far, quite frankly. But then the pandemic hit, and that really changed the game all the way around, from needs of students to cost of operations to levy cycles, just the ability to communicate. So really changed the game. So we really want to make sure people have the facts and the information so they can make a informed decision. So we talked about the monthly financial report at our last board meeting. I mean, some of it is baked into the general presentation beyond here, but I just want to take a pause and ask the question of our board members that are here. We changed the format a little bit from what we had been doing previously as it relates to addressing financial reports, monthly financial reports. Was that format better, helpful? What can we do to make it better?
Any members comment? Did you? I found it to be quite helpful. Dr. Molinar.
Sorry, thank you. I also found it very, very helpful. Thank you.
Well, at any point, any members or any community members for that matter, to include the media, if there is questions as it relates to the finances, whether that's a monthly report or a 5-year forecast, which is upcoming, I encourage people to send their questions to me via email, make an appointment, board members, and come in and sit down. Because I want you, as the representatives of the city, to be able to speak about the levy. And I know this isn't what you do for a living. I get that. And it is complicated. But again, you know, we heard a story about someone out in the community, and a question was asked, and somebody in the audience answered the financial question for that person, and it was House Bill 920. So it's good to know that people are beginning to have a bit more of understanding, and I think that's the key to really people understanding what it takes to run a public school district, and how difficult it is from a funding perspective. The system is just a very difficult one to maneuver and requires the support of the community in order to do it. So are there any questions about the actual 5-year forecast? Now, whoops, sorry.
Excuse me, Dr. Thompson.
Yes, ma'am.
I think Member Harrison had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Thompson, it is appreciated to have our questions answered and having access to you, being accessible to us as a board. One of the things that I think we strive to do, and we're going to talk with Mrs. Sykes, the chair. One of the things that we certainly want to do is ask questions, but we want to make sure that we are not emailing questions but not answering the questions to the general public.
Understood, yeah.
And so at times we will email questions, but we also will ask the same questions in the meetings so that we can be sure that if we have questions, I'm sure the public have questions.
Absolutely.
We want to make sure that everyone is comfortable with the information and that we are not just simply asking and keeping it contained within emails, but the public have access to the questions and answers.
Yeah, and Pastor Harrison, that's a great point. So any emails I get as it relates to a question, a financial question, whether they're from the board or the community, I'll compile those and just make it a slide, and I'll just recap them. So that, again, I think hearing this repetitively is how you learn it. And so I think that's really important, and that's just another avenue to answer questions. And like you said, clearly if somebody on this board or in the community has the question, they're not the only person that has that exact same question. Mm-hmm. So we can hit that. So again, this is our format. Gives you the really in-depth. I think one of the challenges with this format, although necessary as you start to get more and more comfortable with it, you'll see the value in it, but it does year over year, and then it goes to the forecast, and then year over year actuals, and then back to the forecast in terms of comparison.
Dr. Thompson, before you go any further, let me just see. So are you not going to say anything about the September monthly finance report?
This is it right here.
Because
Yes.
I want us to.
Yeah, this is the actual September monthly report right here.
Okay, so for time's sake, I just want us to,
Okay.
even though we went through this last night, I do want you to give a pretty quick summary so
Okay.
we can move on to the five-year
Sure.
forecast.
So you'll see all these pages that are on this, and lots of graphs and some explanations and some percentages, and they're all important to monitor. Mm-hmm. Probably most important to monitor, quite frankly, is myself, Dr. Robinson, and the senior administration. But one quick one to look at is just the last page. The very last page tells you the story. Mm-hmm. So most important isn't the variance from the first 3 months of last year to the first 3 months of this year, because there's going to be wild variances depending on. For example, this year our taxes came in much later than they did the year before. So it threw us off for 1 month, and 1 month looked very different than the next month. But what is important is as we start to get more months, we get more confidence in what the data is telling us, and then we compare that to the previous forecast. We'll be doing another one in November. And so as we move forward, we'll be comparing it to our November forecast, and then we'll know if we're on pace, not on pace, to either make improvements or hit the numbers that we projected. So that's what you're seeing. What you see on this very last page is all the really key numbers. And then this page is an important page, too, to take a look at. You can see, and I think
Excuse me, Dr. Thompson. So, Kim, those really key numbers, we want to go back to those?
Yeah, sure.
And let's just say those numbers out loud.
Sure. So on the revenue side of the house, we are trending right now on our, this is as it's compared to the 5-year forecast. This isn't our total revenue. This is just compared to what we forecasted. We're coming in at almost $4 million more in collections than we anticipated. So based on the data that we have right now, which is a short amount of data, it's 3 months of data, it would appear as though we're going to pull in more revenue. I will tell you that I'm optimistic when we do our October student count that our revenue will be a little bit higher even than this, because we forecasted declining student enrollment and we don't. This year we have increased our student enrollment. So that's what state aid is based on, but they won't make that adjustment, the state won't make that adjustment until the October count. Then from the expenditure side is where we know that we need to do some work. We're looking at $23.5 million above what we had anticipated for expenditures. And at last night's board meeting, we talked about what some of those factors were or are that are driving that number. And we're also in the process administratively reviewing that to see how much of this we can trim down in this fiscal year. So that's still an objective of ours moving forward. And so those are, so you then subtract the overage on revenue versus the overage on expenditures, and you end up at 19 million and change, and that's the number that we're looking at right now. We knew we would be in deficit spending, and again, that's in large part, well, it's not large part, it is absolutely impossible not to move into deficit spending unless you're passing levies with great regularity is the only way that won't happen. I've never seen a school district that doesn't do it. It's boom and bust cycles, and now we're in the bust side of the cycle. And then just briefly to wrap up, I would encourage you to take a look at our investments. I think it's really critical for the community to know that we just don't sit on our money. We invest it. We invest it safely, of course. But we've done quite well. We're pulling in right now, starting to slow, but at our peak, about $1 million a month in additional revenue from our investments. And that's part of what's driving our overage on our revenue right now, is in large part due to the interest that we're collecting. So while we have the payment for the COPS at a little over $1 million, we're also, that $40 million is also generating revenue until we spend it on the Kenmore project.
Any questions from the committee or members? Dr. Thompson, you want to just quickly, just COPS, as we go through this process of looking at whether or not the levy will pass and whether or not there will be a new Kenmore,
right.
I think there is some questions as to what's happening with the Miller South Pfeiffer School.
No, that's
and
a great
so that
question.
COPS could answer that.
So COPS stands for Certificates of Participation. So a school district can take out a low-interest loan, which is what a COPS is. Your buildings that you own serve as collateral until the new building's built, and then that serves as collateral for that loan. The total project's more, budgeted at $63 million for the project, but $40 million of it is coming from this low-interest loan called a COPS. So those dollars and that project are committed, and that will be the closure eventually, once the building is constructed, of Miller South would close, Pfeiffer would close, and on the old Kenmore High School will be torn down, and on that property will be built the K-8, or is that right? No, 3-8, right? 3-8. No, is it 3-8, right? Yep. 3-8 performing arts program on one side of the building. On the other half of the building is Pfeiffer at K-5, and those that allows us to really, build it much cheaper by utilizing shared space like cafeterias and some other things that otherwise, if we built two separate buildings on two separate pieces of property, the cost of construction would have been much higher to build two versus one. Sorry?
Dr. Thompson, Dr. Robertson. Dr. Robertson, did you have a clarification?
Clarifying, and that was 4-8, because I said 38.
Oh, for it.
Oh, okay. Got it. 4-8. Thank you. 4-8, not 3-8. Thank you.
And you want to explain that 4-8, not 3-8?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah. You're keeping me on track here, Mrs. Sykes. It's the student population. 4th graders, 5th graders, 6th graders, 7th graders, and 8th graders are the kids that attend the performing arts school.
Right.
And then on the other side, Pfeiffer is your traditional elementary school, K through 5.
So just to make it clear, when we talk about passing the levy and being able to build a new North High School, it does not mean that we are not also in the process of building the Miller Pfeiffer School.
Yeah,
So we're not saying we're going to do one or the other.
No, that's
we have
correct.
one funding source that's going to handle, called COPS, that's going to handle the Miller Pfeiffer financing, and then the levy, if that is passed, will handle the
That's
North
correct.
High School.
That's correct. That's correct. So that project is moving forward. There's a lot of things that transpire before you build a building, and so those things are happening right now, but there is definite movement. It's moving forward, and the project is continuing. It's just you don't see it quite yet.
Okay.
So any further questions about the monthly?
Let me go to Dr.
Finance
Molinar
report.
first. Dr. Molinar?
I just want to say thank you again for this, and I know I said I appreciated the presentation, but I think it is also nice to have the detailed information and the specific things. For me, the presentation was very helpful, but our community is filled with people a lot smarter than I am and a lot better with numbers than I am, and so I appreciate that we are presenting both, so thank you.
That's all right.
President Autry?
Yes, Dr. Thompson, you mentioned our buildings as collateral. Which buildings are?
They're the non-CLCs. So there are 10 buildings that are non-CLC in the district, to include this one. Those serve as collateral until the building is up, and then then these will come off of being under collateral, and the building will take its place.
So those 10 non-CLC buildings are worth the $63 million? Okay.
Yes. That we had to couple them together to hit that dollar amount. Good question.
Member Harrison?
My understanding was it was 40 million, but the building itself is 63 million.
That's correct. So some of those funds, to answer your question, we were able to transfer some of our ESSER dollars into a holding account for this project, and then we are still working with the city there were LFI, locally funded initiatives. So when you do a project with the OFCC, the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, so there was this partnership between the state, the city, and the school district to build all these buildings that we built, 35 CLCs. Very, very unique, unheard of. I don't think it's been done anywhere in the country like it was done here. So it was really out of the box way to find the funding, which was a little like $800 million. So the LFI's money is money that the state wouldn't co-fund. You have to raise yourself, which we did, and there's roughly $16 million sitting in that account, and we hope to have access to, we'd love to have all of it, but at least half of it to put toward, which is what we budgeted to put towards this project.
And Dr. Thompson, that was a bond issue, correct?
No. No, it's not a bond issue. That was a school district can indebt itself up to 9% of our total property valuation, which we're nowhere near, without a vote of the public. So that COPS deal was a board-approved decision as a way to fund the project, whereas North is a bond issue. So North takes a public vote that Pfeiffer Miller South project did not.
Member Harrison, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I was speaking of the LFI when we built all of the schools, when we built all of the community learning centers, that was a school, City of Akron, and the money was raised through a bond issue, so taxpayers, correct?
Well, the money was actually largely given from the OFCC. The city took out an income tax, which they moved the income tax collections to the school, to the project. So technically, it was not a bond issue, and it doesn't show up as debt for the district. So again, done differently.
I guess what I'm trying to get to is that was a taxpayer initiative as far as the money that was actually used to build the school. However we did it was taxpayer, and the taxpayers agreed to build the schools.
Yes, absolutely. It was in the the form was different. Instead of a bond issue, which is a set amount of money based on your property value, it was passed by the residents of Akron as an income tax, which obviously I think we all understand what that means. So it was based on people's income, not based on their home value, which is different, very different, but that's how it was passed. But absolutely, the city of Akron paid for these buildings, a large part of the buildings, and so did the state with the tobacco money, which is where that came from. Tobacco settlement money is how the OFCC was funded.
Fine. So I think at this point, just for information sources, fact that the state does allow cities to use income tax to pay for, usually individual think the only way we can pay for schools is through bond issues, but the state does allow individuals, and quite frankly, there are some school systems around close by Akron that have used income tax to pay for schools.
Yeah.
So income tax and bond issues are the two ways that we can pay for the schools per the state of Ohio.
Yeah, typically
Which
what
is
you'll
rarely done, but
and where you do see, you can use an income tax to fund your school.
Yes.
And some districts do, but they are typically more agricultural-based schools because farmers don't want to pay property tax on a 1,000-acre farm. They'd rather pay income tax. And if you know anything about farmers, they always show a debt, always. So it's much more, it's a lot less of a tax burden for a farmer to pay income tax than it is to pay property tax. It's a different kind of property tax, but nonetheless, it's the same.
yes. I think that we've been at community meetings where some of the community individuals ask, why don't we use income tax? And it sounds strange to use income tax to pay for school expenses, but the state does allow it.
Yeah, and in Akron and in most communities, and a lot of communities, I should say,
Choose not to.
it's kind of an unwritten rule that income tax belongs to the city and property tax belongs to the school district.
Yeah.
Not codified in any kind of law. It's just kind of an understanding that's been around for a very long time.
Okay.
So I wanted to talk today about what is the process, so you understand, where do these numbers come from? I mean, is
Excuse me, Dr. Thompson.
Yes.
I'm sorry to keep interrupting
That's
you. But,
okay.
last evening we talked a little bit about this variance and this $23 million that's above the anticipated amount. And you said that you, in conjunction with Dr. Thompson, will be working to look at how we could reduce that amount.
That's
Could you
correct.
just quickly go over some of those areas that we perhaps could find some reduction the next time we take a look at this variance?
Well, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Robinson in just a minute, but just a little bit of background on that. So, we have appropriations, and when you hear the word appropriation, and what the heck does that mean? It's basically the budget,
Yeah.
which you voted on a
2
couple
weeks
of weeks
ago.
ago. Yeah. So, what I know Dr. Robinson's looking at right now, and we'll be working in collaboration, is what are things on that plan that we can delay, not do, reorganize in a different way to try and bring those expenditures down off what has already been appropriated. So, Dr. Robinson, is there anything you want to add to that?
I guess pretty much you've said it, but we had some positions that were in the budget that we did not, that were already budgeted for, that we don't necessarily need to be filling right now. So we're going to be taking those off. So actually yesterday I found over $1 million of worth of things that I'm going to have to really suggest that we prolong doing. However, I do want to be very clear because some of these are capital improvement projects.
Okay.
Like we are going to do our best to patch roofs and foam them and whatever we need to do to get us another 2 or 3 years, but these things have been kicked down the road for the last 10, and we're now at a point that we might can get a year, maybe 2 years out of some of these patches. Well, that's money that I can push, I would say, into the next budget, but I could push that money to where it's not going to, I can pull it back into the forecast, if you will, to make it just very simple. And there are a plethora of those projects that they just happen to fall at this time that it's now time to do. So those are things that we can possibly prolong, which will, what we've looked at, we can probably get the variance with some cautious ease to about roughly 15, 16 million with some cautious ease. Once we kind of go through some other things, we probably can get it down to about roughly about maybe 12. We are hoping for 10, but I don't certainly want to be putting numbers out there. But we're hoping for about 12 if once we've finally looked at everything. But to be realistic right now with ease, and I say cautious ease, is about 15 million, 15, 16 million. And when we're done, it'll probably be about 12. If we're lucky, we can get to 10, but it'll probably be about 12.
I love that. I love. Can you say 10 one more time?
No,
I
cannot. But no, we've met a few times, multiple times actually, about it. But I think it's important for us to know, for our community to know as well. We were on cycle for vehicles, for buses, for refresh of technology and different equipment, and we sort of fell off about maybe, I've been here years, so maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
My first year.
Once you fall off, it's hard to get back on, but we have to get back on because we have buses that we're actually waiting for 2 or 3 buses that we paid for the year before I got here, and we haven't gotten them yet, and it's because of the supply chain. But it's things like that that we've been working on trying to put on schedule. But I just think it's important for the board, for the community to know that this is not something that just happened right now. This has kind of been in the works. This variance has kind of been in the works over the last couple of years. It just happens to fall now. And even with the levy, we are still going to have to make additional cuts and some reorganizational things. And again, at the next presidential election in 4 years from now, 8 years, and again 12 years from now, we will be having to be on the ballot each one of those times because we need money to be able to maintain our CLCs and to be able to do some of the fiscal things that have to be done.
And again, just to support that, you know, when you hear cutting $10 million and, you know, it's a $400 million budget, percentage-wise, that's not that high. Sounds easy enough. But remember, 85% of our budget is people. 15% of our budget's hard to move. It's electricity, it's buses, it's vans, it's fuel, it's repairs. And always in every school district I've ever been in, when when finances get tight, circle the wagons around your classrooms, your academic, because that's our core business, right? It's our core business. But what happens is these other things all get cut. But you can't cut them forever. And then they come to roost. And all of a sudden, you have, which we had until we ordered these new buses, we had 17 buses on the road that were over 15 years old. The state recommends replacing them at 10 years. And we're driving them at 16, 17-year-old buses. Well, it comes with a lot of cost in maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. And we need probably 5 or 6 vehicles. Dr. Robinson and I met with Steve Keenan, and, you know, he pleaded for his vehicles, and, you know, you want to give them to him because he needs them. It's not, there's people without vehicles, but that
Thank
need
you,
them.
Dr. Thompson. I think it's not just we need them, but we need them to be safe.
That's
so
correct.
as they get older, then carrying our children on those buses is not a safe thing. What would you say is the average cost of a bus?
It's about $100,000 now
Okay.
per bus. Yeah, they're expensive. So,
Okay.
so I want to move into, you know, just so you get a sense of what we're going through right now. Obviously, we're working on this and have been for a while, and whatever reductions that we can make will impact the 5-year forecast. But I'm going to be, just being upfront, transparent, I'm going to be very conservative about the cuts in terms of putting them into this coming 5-year forecast.
Okay.
So, you know, let's take a look at revenue. What do we look at? How do we predict our revenue? So some of the things that we do is we look at trends for everything, trend data. So we can pull all of our revenue categories, and we do, and we look at them over the last 5 years, and from that we try to extrapolate what they're going to look like over the next 5 years. We need to review our student population estimates for the future, and then we look at our current last five years or so of enrollment data. And just a great example is this year that we're actually sitting in. The forecast, the current May forecast, has a 1% reduction in student enrollment every year. Well, didn't happen this year. We actually increased in student enrollment. So that's a good thing. On one hand, in the long run, it's a good thing. But in the immediate right now, it's challenging because now you have to have more staff to support more students, so you're hiring more than you forecasted. So the first number that jumps out at you is revenues or expenditures are going up, pressuring the variance, and we're not going to receive the additional funding till later in the year to help kind of close that gap a little bit. So we look at that data. We review the last 5 years of tax collection percentages and determine best estimates for future collection rates. So again, we do well in Akron. Most people pay their taxes, but not everyone. Some people default, whether that's personal property or business property. Business can go out of business. I mean, there are just things that happen. So we never collect 100%. But if we overestimate and we lose, and the tax collection rate is 2% lower than what we guessed or what we base as our best understanding, it's millions of dollars in swing in terms of revenue. So we try, we want to be conservative, and I am conservative in these numbers that I put in a 5-year forecast, but I can't be overly conservative too, because then that causes cuts in everything that don't need to happen to transpire, which hurts our students at the end of the day. So we try our best to be as accurate as we can be. We need to be mindful of pending litigation, or legislation rather. The state has consistently whammied public schools in terms of funding for quite some time. So I won't get into my personal belief about why and what's happening, but the reality is it is definitely happening. And so we have to look at legislation that's being talked about, and try to determine how that might impact our revenue. We have to, of course, prepare for contract negotiations. That's part of what we do. So our contract with all of our staff, which is fortunate and unfortunate depending on how you look at it. All of our unions' contracts run congruently. So they all have to be negotiated in the same year. I would prefer that's not the case, but it is the case here. So we have to determine ahead of time what we think may be the results of a contract to the best that we can. And that is very difficult to do. You'll see in a minute just a quick look at what some of the impacts of a variance have, or at least our current variance. If we don't show 3 years of in the black, that means that we can't certify a 3-year contract. It would be less than that. So that's a whole different conversation about how we go about handling that and move forward. Additionally, if we show a red number in year 3 or earlier, it was worse, obviously, but in year 3, that begins the motion of fiscal watch, caution, fiscal emergency, all of those things. So we would be on the first, the first rung, or if you will, or the first phase of being under fiscal watch, and what it requires is us to put together a financial recovery plan and pass a levy. That's the first thing they tell you. I can tell you that if you continue to go down that road and you end up under state receivership, then union contracts are null and void. The board is essentially non-existent. The superintendent has very limited power, and the treasurer has no power. And we have a new board appointed. Essentially, it's called a commission, but it's a board, and everything flows through them. And the first thing they do is cut to state minimum standards, and that would crush our school district and our programs. So that's just something that we have to prepare for, or prevent is a better way of saying it. Determine levy cycles, which you heard Dr. Robinson just talk about and kind of put out there, levy cycles coming up, and then prepare for potential campaign efforts. So when we look at expenditures, some of them are the same. We need to review all staffing levels and determine need. There is not a single position in this school district that was created, whether it was with ESSER money or any other revenue source, that the administrator or administration didn't or doesn't believe makes an impact on student achievement. But you have to, but that's expensive. It's expensive to do what you need to do. Our budget, our general fund budget is $401 million. Our total funds, all funds, $573 million. We're one of the largest businesses in the city of Akron, essentially. One of the largest employers in Akron. So when we have openings, we have to look at it, each opening, and do our very best diligence to determine, do we fill that position? Do we not fill that position? And what programs, et cetera, are we going to fund, and which ones aren't we? We need to research healthcare trends and data as it relates to potential rate increases. So right now, I have to look into a crystal ball and determine how much are our rate increases. We have, which was mentioned last night, we have currently 10 what fall into the category of catastrophic, 10 catastrophic cases in our school district right now, $200,000 or more claims. Obviously, we 100% support these people. They're our staff, and it could happen to any one of us, right? Any one of us could be a $200,000 claim tomorrow. So I don't say that begrudgingly, but what it does is it really impacts our rates. So the current state trend is somewhere around 9% increase. So that's what I believe we'll end up forecasting. I have our consultants that I'm meeting with to see what their thoughts are and see what they see as trends as it relates to specifically our data. Judy Newser, I got to give her a shout out. She manages that stuff so well. She's really top notch at it. So we have to take a look at that. We have to know what your stop loss is, our reserves, and our pending large claims. So sometimes you can build up more stop loss than you need, and a trick of the trade is to move some of that money into general fund. But the downside is if you get your stop loss too low, funds aren't there to support it, you got to transfer out of general fund. So it can work both ways. Review building maintenance needs and plans for the future. This is a early caution, but I say this to boards and future boards and this administration and future administrations that will follow us. It is imperative, in my view, that sometime in the near future, we pass a PI levy, permanent improvement levy. What is that? That is a levy that money can only be used for repairs. Because our CLCs were all built in a little vacuum of time, 35 buildings. In 10 years from now or so, we're starting to see it already, the oldest buildings, the 2007 buildings, as we're getting closer and closer to 20-year-old buildings. If you're out looking for a house, you don't want to buy a house that's 24 years old because you're going to need to put a new furnace in it. You're going to need to put a roof on it. You're going to need new windows. You're better off buying a 30-year-old house or a house that somebody was aggressively taking care of, one or the other. But that's what's happening in our world as well. So that's not imminent on us right now, but it's not far. It's not far. And we need to be good stewards of those buildings and plan for that moving forward. Be mindful of pending legislation. Again, we talked about it in revenue. It's just as important as in expenditures, maybe more. The contract negotiations obviously impact our expenditures and our revenue. And we need to understand what are the needs to support all of our departments. What's coming up that we don't know, sitting in the treasurer's office or the superintendent's office. You don't you don't know every single department and what's happening. So we have to make sure we're communicating well and understanding what their needs are. You can slash a budget if you want to on let's say, building repairs and maintenance. But if a roof starts to leak and it's pouring in the classroom, guess what? We're fixing it, whether there's money in that account or not. If the heat goes out, boiler dies or whatever, we're going to have to fix it. So all too often I've seen schools slash those budgets too low to prop up a 5-year forecast to only pay for it anyway, doing transfers out of general fund in January, February, because they've run out of money. Know the strategic plan, because the strategic plan drives our district, and inside of that will tell us what are the programs that we know might be being formed or expanded, or so being mindful of what's in our strategic plan and baking that into our 5-year forecast is very important. So bottom line, back to that bottom line, this is where we're at right now. When you take our variance, subtract our additional revenue, that's what we're looking at on top of what we already projected to be deficit spending. So just to give you just a quick insight of this is very, very rudimentary math here. Do not take this as our forecast, but I just want to show you what a variance really does. So when you look at the fiscal year 25, which we're in right now, we forecasted that we would have $90 million in cash reserves at the end of the year. Well, if our trend data stays the same as it is now, that would be $70 million. Then in 26, we projected $66 million. Now remember, a variance is compounding. So 66 million becomes 31 million. And 25 million in 2027 becomes a $27 million deficit. You cannot have a deficit. We would have to wipe that out, or you fall into state receivership, one or the other. And then in 28, we were showing that deficit, because remember, we've been saying all along, we're in deficit spending, we're in deficit spending. No one's fault. It's just the boom and bust cycle of what we've done, and the fact that we've stretched this levy cycle very far. Then we're looking at $100 million. So you can see because of variance compounds, how it builds. You know, and you think of like just one additional person, you know, just one person. One person, roughly $100,000, depending on what they do, but just for an easy ballpark number. Well, that's $5 million. That $100,000 is $500,000 off the back end of the 5-year forecast, because that salary is compounding itself. So whether we reduce or keep or what we do, and then one-time expenditures to reduce a one-time expenditure doesn't have the same impact on the 5-year forecast as does personnel, anything that's recurring.
Okay, Dr. Thompson, before we go any further, let me see if there's any questions from the members of the committee or members of the board. Okay.
I'll reserve mine. Let him continue.
Okay. All right. Dr. Thompson.
Well, we've seen this last night. I just want to briefly go over the proposed finance timeline. Again, last night we did seek and approve the September financial report. Obviously, tonight we're looking into this, and any questions that you have, whether they hit you at midnight like they will me. Write them down. I don't know how you guys do it, but I think I have early onset, so I need to keep a notebook near me. And a lot of times I don't even remember that I wrote something down. But write it down, call me, because your thoughts might be something we haven't even thought of. You could be averting a problem. Just at our board meeting last night, someone in this room mentioned to me that our meeting was supposed to be at 5:30, not 4:30. And I'm like, oh, I'll look into that. And it was accurate. So, and thank you, by the way. 11/4, that's the day before the election. Remember, this is Monday, election on Tuesday. What I'll have modeled for you are 2 5-year forecasts. So between now, this is the urgency of administratively us making whatever reductions that we think we can make. We have to have them done. They're not necessarily by 11/4, but not too much past that, because you have to approve a 5-year forecast in the month of November and give me enough time to ship it all, which takes minutes, but because it's electronic, but I have to ship that off to ODU before the end of the month. Statutorily required.
ODU?
Ohio Department of Education and Workforce.
Thank you.
The old ODE, ODU. I like that, ODU. That was a good move, good change. On 11/19, we have a finance committee meeting, and there's where we're going to take a look at that. We'll obviously know the results of the election. We'll look at the 5-year, whichever 5-year forecast it's going to be. Whatever additional cuts that we make, I'll bake into that as well. So this will be pretty close to our final 5-year forecast on the 19th, and we'll know. So we'll have that component, and I would also like to start the discussion about whether it's a financial stability plan. As you heard Dr. Robinson say, passing a levy is not the final. It's not the final step. It's the first step. So we have to be fiscally conservative in order to stay solvent for as long as possible, and so that we know that's going to mean some tough decisions. Not nearly as tough if we fail, and we have to come and have the conversation about a recovery plan. And the recovery plan is more. I know that we're going to be required to do that to the Department of Education and Workforce, because we'll show that negative number. 11/25 board meeting, pass or fail the levy, will have a 5-year forecast for approval. Then if the levy fails at 11/25, we're going to need to make a decision about that spring ballot, because we have to do 2 board resolutions, and we have to have this done 110 days out. So time is of the essence. And then the levy committee makes their decisions as well, moving forward from there. And then, again, discuss those elements. Certainly won't be ready, but the elements of a financial recovery plan, starting to have those conversations. And then levy passes. We celebrate a little bit on the 25th. And then we begin the conversation about what are some of those elements that would be part of stabilizing the district. And Dr. Robinson and I will do that together. Obviously, I'll make recommendations. Ultimately, Dr. Robinson will make final decisions as it relates to what that might look like. And then at our 12/16, this is still undetermined. We're looking at potentially having another finance committee meeting there. I like the idea because I'm sure that board members will bring gifts to the administration there since we're so close to Christmas. I'm a medium, wear a size shoe 7, I like shoes. But the board, at that point, will have a plan in place, because we'll have had a little over 5 weeks to prepare whichever plan that is. And this would be your first look at, these are the recommendations of the administration, and then you'd be asked to approve it at the next month board meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson.
532.
Member Harrison.
I have a couple questions. It's clear that we are due for a levy. That's clear.
Yeah.
I do not want to leave the public, our stakeholders, with the impression that we're going to continue to come back and ask for money. There's a reality of a levy cycle.
Right.
Listening to the presentation, it's clear that we need to manage resources. Well, if we're talking about people, if we're talking about buildings, can you explain a little more? We've held on to buses 5 years too long. We have maintenance issues with buildings, that normal wear and tear of a building, our new buildings, our older buildings, the ones we started with, our teachers. At the end of the day, that's what we do. We teach kids. We transport kids. We teach them. We feed them. So the ideal of, there are some necessary repairs. There's some necessary things. There's some necessary management issues that we have to perform. Can you give us a clearer picture of, when you say 80, 85, you said today 85% is?
85% is salaries, benefits, retirement, all of those. The cost of our staff is 85% of our budget.
So then the 15% is all operational.
That's correct.
The 85%, which funding source is that?
Well, it can be out of multiple funding sources. Some of it's title money, some of it's primarily general fund, but there are some like, for example, special education teachers sometimes can come from that. IDEA dollars, some state reimbursements for catastrophic special needs students. There are some funding sources, but generally speaking, that's general fund.
So it would be helpful for me to know, when we're talking about expenditures, from what fund this expenditure comes from. So when you say Title I, and I hear Title I
Right.
a lot, can you explain that one, just that one?
Well, I'm going to turn that over to do you want to take that one, Dr. Robinson?
Dr. Robinson, would you like to answer the question? Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I don't need you to conduct the
I'm
meeting.
sorry.
You're welcome.
Okay. So we receive federal dollars, which is based upon our student population, and that's how you're funded. Some of our schools are strictly Title I schools. Some are not. Most of our schools are Title I, but we do have a fair share that are not Title I schools. And so when you have Title I schools, those are federal. It's based on the population of students that are within that building, and if they qualify for free and reduced lunch. That's a big determiner. That is the determiner of whether or not it's going to be a Title I school. And so we also have Carl Perkins. I was sitting here trying to think of the name of it, but we also have Carl Perkins, which is connected to our CTE, College and Career Technical Education funding. That's how we're able to do a lot of the things we can do with our college and career academies, Sometimes it is used for staff. Sometimes it is also used and/or for supports and resources to help fund this. And sometimes it's also used to help provide opportunities for our students to be able to do certain activities. But there are specific guidelines that you have to follow, which is, it's a federal fund. It's like Title I. We also have Title II, Title III, Title IV. And each of those, it's all federal funded, but the Title I is the one that we are able to do a lot of the stuff that we're doing right now. We did reduce on the title side last school year, and we will have to, we're already in conversations around making further reductions from title because the Fed state is going to be cutting our title budgets across the United States, specifically in Ohio. That's going to happen. So we know, and so we're already looking at what do we have, what positions do we have, what resources are we funding. For example, we pay for our instructional coaches that are in the buildings from Title I to help support the schools. There was a time here in Akron prior to COVID that we didn't have them, and then when we had them, they were shared amongst schools. Unfortunately, we had to kind of go to that model, back to that this year, post-COVID, given the fact that our title funds were also reduced. So the more students we get in the district that qualify for that, that helps to increase our title funds. There were times when certain schools didn't want it, not in Akron, but just in general across the United States, they didn't want title funds. But now people want it because they see that, you know, it helps us to be able to help our kids. That's how we can pay for some of the tutors that we have and some of the other expenditures that we have. So the title funds is something that I'm praying that does not get cut too significantly because we need it.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson. There's another way to say that is that it also reflects the poverty level within our school district.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's what it does.
Yes. And we certainly qualify for that.
Madam President.
Yes.
Dr. Thompson, it would be helpful to know which positions are funded by which title or funding source. So if we can have a breakdown of what positions are funded, it would kind of help when you speak. There's a lot of acronyms that's used, a lot of titles that's used, a lot of grant. I would personally like to know, okay, Title I is related to services that would be going to poverty-ridden schools or schools that need additional resources.
Right.
Okay. So Title II would be for XYZ. So it would personally help me to understand which positions are funded so I can see the purpose of the funding. That would help a lot.
Are those being put on the agenda, the funding source, when we hire someone? I'm sorry. I've got to get this down.
Yeah, you got to get
Chairman
used to this.
Sykes,
That's right, Dr. Robertson.
Yes, ma'am. It is put on the board agenda, but to what you're asking for, Pastor Harrison, is different from what is on this board agenda. You're asking for, I know what you're asking for, and yes, we can do that. It will take a moment, not long, but we will need to. I don't know how many pages of that it will be for you, but yes, we can.
Member Molinar. President Archer.
Yes, I was just going to add, I think it'd be helpful for the full board to know all of those different funds and what they mean. And I thought we had a document from an orientation packet, maybe prior to you. I don't know if it's floating around somewhere, but it had all the acronyms, including the different funds that we were talking about. I think that would be helpful for the full board just to get a better understanding.
And it would help you too, this is the appropriations, the budget that was approved. And so it tells you, all the categories and how much is budgeted. It doesn't tell you who, where it's being expended per se, but that will get to you as well. I think that'll help you too, because then you can look down at it and say, oh, wow, Title I, well, that's $3 million, or, whatever the numbers are. And it's right here in the budget. So it doesn't tell you what they can be expended on, but we can add that, as Ms. Autry stated, so that you can look at, okay, that pays for that pays for underserved kids, or that pays for kids on that are autistic, or across the board. Help you start to kind of wrap your head around this monster called school finance.
Okay, any additional questions? All right, then, well, that will, let me just say that we will have the meeting on 12/16.
Okay.
That we will confirm that meeting. I think that given all that we have to discuss, including the election, the results of the election, I know that that traditionally you have not had a committee meeting in December, but I think it will be necessary to do so. And we will try to keep that as short and concise as possible, so we can move on to celebrating the holiday and hopefully celebrating the passage of the levy. So this will conclude the Finance Committee at 6:43 p.m. Thank you, Dr. Robinson.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Dr. Thompson. Thank you, Dr.